Hello everybody, welcome along to this video. This is Mr. Johnson Teaches Structure Methods. It's part of my language revision series of videos, helping you unpick some of the different bits of language that you might need as you move through towards your GCSEs. And what you need to be doing basically is, as you're listening to this video, as I go over the different methods, have pen and paper ready. Make some notes and also be ready to pause the video, because on the screen will be useful information for you, but the most important thing is that you are actually writing that information down as you are listening. So don't just sit there and listen, that won't do it on its own. By writing it down, you will actually help the information stick in your brain. So without further ado, let's move forward and actually just talk about when you write about methods. So when you're writing about structure or language, you'll need to identify those methods that the writer is using. That's my first bullet point there. So whenever you're given a piece of text, either in class or ultimately in your GCSEs, you do need to be able to identify what the writer is using, and that's what we call the methods. The second bullet point's really important though. Never just feature spot. Features being like the name for the method. So never just sit there spotting methods. That on itself will not be enough. It won't gain you good marks. Always remember that you need to explain the effect that that method has. And at the very bottom of the screen, I've put that as an example. The writer, for example, has shifted our focus onto the shadow, which makes the tone more sinister because you feel it might be a threat. That second part from which is the bit where I'm really gaining myself some marks. Shifting the focus is the method, but the next bit, the explanation, is the bit that often students can miss, so make sure that isn't you. Don't be the person who misses the effect. So what I'm going to do now is just have a quick look at actually what is structure. And in many ways I find it simpler personally to think about it like a series of stepping stones. So think about a piece of text like this. The first step that you take, that is the beginning of the text, the start, where the writer begins. And then you've got the journey across the river. The stepping stones are what takes you there, bit by bit by bit, towards the points that the writer wants to take you to at the very end. And then, of course, in the middle then, what we have are the different choices that the writer makes. So think of each of those stepping stones as a choice on a journey that the writer wants to take you towards. They give you a bit by bit by bit. So those stones are like the paragraphs. So in this example, you could say simply that I've got maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs going on there as an example. But think of that journey through the text, and the writer is taking you on that journey, and each bit is a stepping stone. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some actual structural methods. Some of these you may have come across in lessons, some you may never have heard of, but as I said at the start of this video, please write them down so you'll be ready to pause this video, please. Now the first one is possibly the most easy one, a really straightforward one to remember, is what the writer focuses our attention on. So it's, as it says there, what the writer wants you to pay attention to in the text. That would apply to almost every paragraph ever written, which is why it's a really important one for you to know. At the bottom though, I've put an example. Ryan's hunters stayed in a pack, marching in step, almost like a military unit. The hunters scared Paddy with their huge dogs and their studs and their leather masks made out of the faces of the dead grown-ups. They were filthy dirty, they smelt of blood and sweat and worse. So what's the writer focusing our attention on in this paragraph? He focuses our attention on Ryan's hunters, how violent they are, how they've got sort of these faces made of dead grown-ups, how bad they smell. All of those details I've just listed, that is what the writer is focusing our attention on. So structurally, he's making us look at details. So it's a very, very simple one. It's one that applies to, as I said, almost every paragraph ever written, and therefore anything you're ever given, you can talk about in one paragraph. The writer focuses our attention on this. On the next paragraph, he focuses our attention on this. And actually what I've just hinted at links to the next method, which is a shift in focus. So a shift being a movement. So between paragraphs, the paragraphs will be about different things. And when they are about different things, you can say the writer shifts our focus. As I've put there, what the writer moves your attention onto. So then have a look at the example there again. I've got the next paragraph of a piece of writing. At least Paddy felt safe with them though. They were used to these streets, they owned them, he saw how easy they were and on top of things at the same time, listening, looking, aware of everything that was going on around them without making a big deal out of it. So he shifts the focus from the violence onto how actually the people that Paddy is with are quite safe and they seem comfortable with the streets. So it shifts from one idea to another. Moving on to our next one, zooming in and zooming out are really important ones, as I've put there, focusing in on small details or looking at the bigger picture? So is a paragraph or a sentence looking at something very small, or is it looking at something very big? And my examples there, like you could have describing flies hovering over a pile of rubbish, for example. That would be a really small detail, the flies. Or the bottom one there, looking at a polluted city surrounding a character. So imagine you've got your character standing there and the city and the skyscrapers are all around him. That's a really big picture. Think of it like camera angles is the other thing I try and get my classes to do as well. Like a director will zoom right in so the camera is looking at a really small detail, like a sentence does, or maybe the camera zooms right out and looks at really the big picture. And again, that's zooming in and zooming out. Foreshadowing is really important as well, really, really important. Can you spot it? It's not always as easy to see, but it's where you're giving clues about something that is about to or will happen in a text. I've got this as another example from a different book. The boy crept up to the fence and looked around. There was the familiar sign, "Keep out, private property, trespassers will be shot." And hanging next to it, just to make sure the message was clearly understood, were the bodies of several dead animals, strung up like criminals, wire twisted round their broken necks. That, I would say, is foreshadowing. This comes at the beginning of a bit of text, and what you've got there is a warning sign and also dead animals. What is it foreshadowing? It requires you to infer the information, but if there are dead animals, maybe that suggests that the boy might be next, or somebody else is about to be killed, or that this is a dangerous place to go to. So foreshadowing, structurally, the writer gives you a clue and it intrigues us, it hooks us, it makes us wonder and ask questions about, in this case, whether the boy will be safe. So foreshadowing, something else to watch out for. Dialogue, I won't go into this one too much, quite literally speech between characters, but it is a structural method. It's how the writer develops the character, gives us more clues about a character, makes us more intrigued about a character by hearing what they have to say, or how they say it, or how they interact with other characters. And quite literally, I have just pasted a little bit there at the bottom just to sort of show you what that looks like. Flashbacks and flash forwards, so jump backwards or forwards in time. So you could have a character having a memory of an event and then the text flashes back forward to the current time. So it's almost a movement in time basically. Watch out for those. Flashbacks are quite common, I would say, going back to memories. Motifs, maybe a slightly harder one because these are dropped throughout a text. So as I've put there, a recurring idea in a text. For example, this is not the only list of ones, there's some I came up with. You could have colours being used as a motif, and maybe they're colours linked with sort of very darkness or linked to light. It could be noises are used as motifs, you keep hearing a noise, or maybe there's a certain word or words that are used several times. An animal could be repeated, or animals, so like links to birds maybe if you're trying to talk about freedom. Motifs, it's basically pattern spotting within a text. Cyclical or circular narrative, you might hear it called either, both mean the same thing. Circular meaning to go round, so as I put there, a plot which begins and ends with the same or a similar idea. One example of a whole story in a film example would be The Lion King. Starts with like the christening of the lifting up of Simba at the very beginning, and at the very end of the film you see the same thing happen but with Simba's son, and it's like the idea of the circle of life. So when things begin and end with a similar or same idea. And then I didn't have time to put a full list, but other ones to watch out for as well. You could talk about the opening and ending. Those are structural methods as well, what the writer opens with and what the writer chooses to end their text with as well. Even if it's just an extract, if you're given a page from a book, it still will have the opening of the extract and the ending of the extract. A plot twist being something you weren't expecting to happen. A time shift, so a bit like moving forward, flashbacks, flash forwards, but actually a jump within the text. So where you don't move backwards and then forwards, or forwards then backwards, it just moves on in time. So maybe a day, an hour, a week, a month. Cliffhangers, leaving us on a climax would be the other good word to use there as well. And you can talk about whether the story is linear or non-linear. So linear, it goes in a straight line, things happen in chronological order, or if it's non-linear, it's jumping about a little bit. And finally, the one I maybe forgot to put on my PowerPoint, if I'm completely honest with you, would be repetition. So when something is repeated, so it could be words, it could be images or ideas, repetition. And those are the structural methods I wanted to talk to you about today. By no means are they the only ones, but I go back to my key message. when analysing structure, there are some really easy wins, some things that you can absolutely guarantee will be there. So when you pick them out, make sure that you then talk about what are their effect. Do they affect the tone, the mood, the feeling, and what questions do they make us ask? Doing those things can help you gain a good grade in your English language. And that's the end of this video. Do check out any other videos on my channel as well. There's lots there designed to try and help you through your English, both language and literature. Thanks for watching this one, and goodbye.